Hey, this is Robert Monroe. I'm going to tie up this series so far. We might come back to it, and that is debunking the difficulty. I borrowed this name from a content creator known as Ryu. He's got super cool videos on video games. I highly encourage you to check out those. If you've missed them, I have talked about piano, guitar, voice, and drums so far, about how the things that stop us dead in our tracks while we're learning are actually conquerable if we just think about them in a slightly different way. We approach them a little bit different. So today we're going to talk about the final instrument in the classic rock band setup. It's the final instrument that I'm really familiar with, which is why I chose these instruments. We might come back to this series later with guests to talk about other instrument families, but for now we're going to put a pin in it with the bass guitar. I'm talking about the electric bass. If you wanted to talk about double bass, I am not really qualified to talk about that because I do not know the exact difficulty spikes with that. I'd have to get a guess for that. So let's talk about electric bass for a second. I'm going to say most people, when you're learning bass, you're coming from another instrument. Now, this might not be true, and I'd love for some engagement on this. If you came from a different instrument and then you started bass, please leave a comment. If you didn't, I also want to hear about it. I'd love to know about your journey. Go ahead, throw a like so more people see this video so we see more responses. That would be fantastic. Now, you come from a different instrument and you come with that instrument's sensibilities. Piano players and guitar players tend to make really awful bass players that then get discouraged to play their instrument because they get into a situation, they play, and then people go, we don't really need you to play bass again. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, you tend to overplay on bass guitar if you come from a piano or guitar background. Why is that? Well, low notes have a tendency to develop over a longer period of time because the waves are literally longer. Like, from a physics standpoint, the waves are longer, which means we really want to feel those notes and stay with them. So the very first big difficulty spike, I think, with playing the bass is knowing how and when to play or keeping it simple. So what's the solution to this particular difficulty spike? It's going to be listening. And this is going to become such a common thread when it comes to specifically bass. It's going to be listening, and it's going to be developing your own sensibilities in terms of how much to play. And knowing omitting something is generally always going to be the right solution. That's going to lead me into the second big difficulty spike, which is because bass is a very approachable instrument, it's a single line instrument, not like guitar or piano, so I only have to worry about one note, which means it's a lot easier to get my head around. Well, because of that, I think people do not think so hard, and they don't develop a theory background. This is a massive detriment and leads to incredible difficulties that can be solved purely by getting a little bit more educated on music theory. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm playing a song and I'm going C, F, G, right? 1, 4, 5. Okay, if you didn't know what 1, 4, 5 was, well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That is music theory. I'm saying that in the key of C, the first note is C, then the fourth note is F, then the fifth note is G. That gives me a musical framework now where I can explore the bass, I can add in other notes if I want, but also I can change keys. What if, actually we're going to go to the key of G? Well, G is 1 now, C is 4, and D is 5. That type of music theory helps us to know what to play and when to play it on bass. I think the best bass players that I've ever been around, and actually I would say just as a general rule, Bass players who have gotten beyond the I'm sitting at home learning an instrument phase tend to be some of the most sophisticated in their music theory understanding. And I think this really comes from the need to know what the notes are so you can play the root notes. Bass as an instrument has one of the lowest margins of error for an instrument. If I make a mistake on guitar, who cares? If I make a mistake on piano, who cares? If I make a mistake on bass, oh boy, you know everybody's looking my way. Everybody's paying attention. So that's the second big difficulty spike is how do I know what I'm supposed to play? Well, that becomes from music theory. The third difficulty spike I want to talk about today is feel. Sometimes you're playing all the right notes, you know what they are, and you're crushing it, but people still don't want to play with you, and it doesn't feel good. Now, this is something that's really complicated, but I'm going to try to simplify this as much as possible. Feel really is the term that we give to things that are hard to explain. It's about that simple. How do you develop good feel? It really comes from, I'd say, two big things. One is listening. When you listen to recordings of people playing with really good feel, especially if you can experience it live, you start to get an understanding of little tricks that they do. Some of the things can be laying back, so meaning playing the notes later than the timing would actually indicate, or potentially rushing, not as common, but sometimes appropriate, to play the notes ahead of where they are. Playing notes longer, meaning legato, holding out the note, or playing it shorter, meaning staccato. These all can help with developing good feel. What does this all have to do? It has to do with intention and knowing when you have that ability to think with that intentionality and knowing when you don't. When you have that ability to really focus and be intent, practice. When you don't, just set your bass aside. Don't even worry about it. And be okay with like a 10-minute practice session like that. That is going to lead you way better results. I think bass as an instrument is one of those instruments where even 10 minutes of that really intent practice would probably do you way more good than hours of meaningless, oh, whatever, I got my bass on me. Very different than from guitar. Weirdly enough, I think guitar benefits the most from mindless practice of any instrument. Weird claim to make, but hit me up in the comments if you disagree with that. This has been Debunking the Difficulty. We've talked about bass, we've talked about piano, we've talked about guitar, we've talked about drums, we've talked about singing. If you enjoyed these, I'd love to hear about it because it helps me make a decision to make more content like this, and it encourages me, which would be very, very nice. So go ahead and follow, leave a like, leave a comment, and until next time, peace out.